Good evening, and welcome once again to the official MUFON Podcast. I'm your host, Richard Beckwith. Tonight, we begin with the new format. We've had some excellent, very well-known, trusted, and esteemed guests and friends on the podcast, but I have come to the conclusion that, and you correct me if I'm wrong, as ufologists, we sort of live in this echo chamber, a bubble, if you will, not unlike a lot of echo chambers and bubbles that people create for themselves when they listen to the same things coming from the same people over and over again over a long period of time. We sort of become indoctrinated, if you will, into a particular way of thinking. The truth of the matter is that most UFO-related podcasts, YouTube channels, and videos out there are devoted to gaining as many clicks as possible and appealing to as many people as possible by being as sensationalistic as possible. As a result, the vast majority of UFO, UAP, ET-related material out there is just rubbish, and it is very difficult to distinguish false information from that which is not. We tend to forget that the study of UFOs, UAPs, what have you, is a serious endeavor with real investigators with their boots on the ground, devoting their time and energy to the pursuit of this enigma. MUFON is a scientific organization dedicated to the study of UFOs for the benefit of humanity. And here on the MUFON Podcast, we're going to start talking about what is really happening right now with our field investigators. Their everyday lives are much more interesting than any reality TV show. Believe me. We will be talking about the latest information related to the search for extraterrestrial life and the UFO UAP phenomenon. And we're going to get considerably more granular by discussing recently filed cases and recently completed cases from the files of MUFON and the National UFO Reporting Center and other credible sources. We will also talk about what is happening inside MUFON and the world of ufology. As a member of the MUFON Board of Directors and a practicing government attorney now for more than 27 years, I give you my word that we will only bring you the most credible information we can relative to this subject. And if something looks questionable or hinky, or if any information we share turns out to be incorrect, we will immediately correct the matter. So, without further ado, tonight we're talking about searching for life as we don't know it. Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb's latest endeavor to communicate with aliens. Chris Mellon's new op-ed in The Hill on government UFO secrecy and some of the latest, strangest UFO cases filed so far this month, including images taken by a Nebraska police officer from his patrol car, video of an object following a Falcon 9 rocket after a launch on January 31st, and video of a large, bright object from a woman who claims to have taken part in an alien hybridization program. All this coming up right now on the official MUFON Podcast. New astrobiology research predicts alien life as we don't know it. The search for alien life has been restricted to using life on Earth as the reference, essentially looking for life as we know it beyond Earth. For astrobiologists looking for life on other planets, there are simply no tools for predicting the features of life as we don't know it. This from SciTech Daily. In new research published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, a team of scientists has tackled this restriction by identifying universal patterns in the chemistry of life that do not appear to depend on specific molecules. These findings provide a new opportunity for predicting features of alien life with different biochemistry to Earth life. We want to have new tools for identifying and even predicting features of life as we don't know it, says co-author of the study Sarah Imari Walker of Arizona State University. To do so, we are aiming to identify the universal laws that should apply to any biochemical system. This includes developing quantitative theory for the origins of life and using theory and statistics to guide our search for life on other planets. They identified a new kind of biochemical universality from the large-scale statistical patterns of biochemistry and found they are more generalizable to unknown forms of life compared to the traditional one described by the specific molecules and reactions that are common to all life on Earth. This discovery enables us to develop a new theory for the general rules of life, which can guide us in the search for novel examples of life. The long and short of this is that there could be life forms out there functioning in ways that we don't recognize based upon our current understanding of biology. The universe is not only stranger than we can imagine, it is stranger than we can imagine. You will find links to the SciTech Daily article and the PNAS study in the description below. Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb is working on a documentary with the producer of the 2016 sci-fi film Arrival to open a discussion about how to communicate with extraterrestrials. According to a March 9th article on phys.org, using Arrival as a springboard, panelist Jesse Snedeker, a professor of psychology and expert in language comprehension, and Loeb examined the potential challenges we might face in attempting to communicate with an alien species. Loeb has long argued the search for alien life should be taken more seriously in scientific circles. He said there are a range of factors to consider should we encounter an alien race. First, humans must try to conquer their sense that they are at the pinnacle of creation, and instead understand that they are instead likely somewhere in the middle of the distribution of intelligences in the Milky Way galaxy, said Loeb, founding director of Harvard's Black Hole Initiative. Earth's inhabitants must also be mindful of the technological gap that will likely exist between the human race and a messenger from beyond the solar system. Such a messenger, he said, probably would arrive in the form of an artificially intelligent object, capable of making a journey lasting millions or perhaps even billions of years. Given a possible wide knowledge gap, we should also be prepared for the possibility that aliens may not want to communicate with us at all, said Loeb, just as we have no desire to communicate with ants on the sidewalk. I would, however, remind you that we have scientists here on Earth who study insects. They're called entomologists. And we also have entomologists who specialize in studying ants and sometimes specific species of ants. Nonetheless, if we directly engage as the Arrival scientists do, the challenge becomes how. Such a process would differ greatly from the search for alien life in years past, said Loeb, when people imagined any contact would likely come in the form of radio signals from extraterrestrials, which may have taken thousands of years to arrive. However, if you have a visitor in your backyard, you better know what you're doing, he said, adding that we might need our own AI systems to assist us interpreting their AI systems. Loeb says, we know that stars formed before the sun by billions of years. We know that they have planets like the Earth around them, so the environment that we have is not rare. Given the public's interest in the subject, the implications that it will have for the future of humanity, I think it's actually non-intelligent on behalf of the scientific community not to engage with the search. Here is Avi Loeb on Joe Rogan's podcast last year talking about why the scientific community has been so resistant to change throughout history, and in particular, why they shun the topic of extraterrestrial intelligence.
If you go back in time, let me give you two examples. Galileo Galilei said, I think the Earth moves around the sun. But at the time, philosophers knew for sure that the sun moves around the Earth. You see it moving in the sky. It was consistent with their religious beliefs, everything. So they said, we don't want to look through your telescope to change our view. We will put you in house arrest. Now, what did they achieve by that? And by the way, I'm in house arrest, but it's because of the pandemic, not because. So what did they achieve by that? They maintained their ignorance, and the Earth continued to move around the sun. You know, reality is the one thing that never goes away, irrespective of whether you ignore it. You can ignore it. Now, there is another example. There is a student at Harvard, that as a result of my book on this subject that is about to come out in a week or so, she was inspired to do her PhD on the theme of my book. So she invited me to a thesis exam just a couple of months ago. And one of the examiners, a professor, asked her, do you know why Giordano Bruno, an Italian guy, was burnt at the stake? And she said, well, he was an obnoxious guy. He irritated a lot of people, which is true. You know, he was an obnoxious. But the professor corrected her and said, no. It was because he said that other stars are just like the sun. There are stars like the sun, and they have planets like the Earth around them, and there may be life on those planets. And that was offensive to the church, because if there is life there and it had sinned, then Christ should have visited those planets to save them, to save the life forms. And, you need copies of Christ to visit those planets, and that was unacceptable, so they burned the guy.
Burned him alive.
So you see that, throughout history, people are not really open-minded about the sky, the heavens, as you said.
It should be noted that Avi Loeb heads the new Galileo project at Harvard University. According to the Galileo website, the goal of the Galileo project is to bring the search for extraterrestrial technological signatures of extraterrestrial technological civilizations from accidental or anecdotal observations and legends to the mainstream of transparent, validated, and systematic scientific research. This project is complementary to traditional SETI in that it searches for physical objects and not electromagnetic signals associated with extraterrestrial technological equipment. You'll find links to the phys.org article and Dr. Loeb's discussion with Joe Rogan in the description below. Former Deputy Director of National Intelligence Chris Mellon has penned an op-ed for The Hill in which he argues that government overclassification may hide UFO videos and harm our national security. According to Melan, if DoD gets its way going forward, videos such as those taken by Navy pilots in 2004 showing UFOs traveling at incredible speeds, eluding our most sophisticated fighters and other materials relating to UFOs, officially known as Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon or UAPs, will be classified and unavailable to the public. Mellon argues that excessive government classification related to the UFO UAP phenomenon undermines national security. Mellon warns that an effort is underway using machine learning to train a powerful computing capability to detect valid UAP videos and photos and to reject fakes or videos that mistakenly capture conventional aircraft. Training the system requires valid, authenticated UAP video. The more, the better. Suddenly, the source of the best, most authoritative UAP videos has been eliminated by this inappropriate but all too commonplace bureaucratic decision to withhold taxpayer-funded information from the taxpayer. He proposes that the DNI and Congress should both ask the UAP Task Force's successor to explain the identifiable or describable damage they believe is reasonably expected from sharing routine UAP videos like Go Fast or FLIR 1. Here is Chris Mellon appearing on Tucker Carlson's program on Fox last year, detailing why he believes the government has been keeping information on military encounters with UFOs secret for so long.
It's largely been a matter of stigma, and people are afraid to discuss it. It's shocking, and this is how I got involved. I became aware in 2016 that U.S. Navy squadrons operating off the east coast of the United States were having recurring encounters with these vehicles, and nobody in the intelligence community was responding. Nobody was supporting them. Nobody was backing them up. Nobody was investigating. It was not being reported up the chain of command. The Secretary of Defense didn't know. It wasn't a matter of concealing the information in the sense of they knew it and processed it and withheld it from the public. It was a matter of hear no evil, see no evil. And that's okay as a personal choice, perhaps, but that's not what you want in the intelligence community.
You will find links to Chris's new article in The Hill and his appearance with Tucker Carlson in the description below. Several interesting cases have been filed so far this month with MUFON and the National UFO Reporting Center. Here are just a few examples. On Thursday, March 10, 2022, at precisely 7:40 p.m. Pacific Time, a woman in Fresno, California, reported seeing a bright object to the southeast of her location, which she first mistook for a plane coming directly towards her, giving the illusion that it was one bright light. but the light never blinked and only stayed in the same place, apparently hovering. After about a minute, it reportedly ejected another object, forming two smaller orbs. Her boyfriend came out and also saw the two lights hovering. After approximately 1 minute, the object emerged again into one object and shot off to the north very rapidly. On Wednesday, March 9th, a witness reported seeing and recording several objects in the skies over Commerce City, Colorado, over several minutes. The witness was sitting in his car facing east when he looked up and saw several objects hovering far to the east. They disappeared, and then he looked right above him to see two spheres fly right over his car going from north to south, and he managed to capture a couple of images. He turned to the northwest and saw one stationary object very high in the sky waiting for a jet coming from DIA to go by it. The jet was traveling west. There was no noise from any of the objects. Now some cases from the National UFO Reporting Center. On March 1st, 2022, at 5:43 p.m. in Kernsville, West Virginia, a witness reported seeing a triangle-shaped object like a pool rack floating across the sky. The inner part of the object appeared to be the sky above it. Isn't that interesting? Giving the witness the impression that the object was projecting the sky above it onto the bottom of the craft. Now, keep in mind, this is just a graphic representation, not a true photograph or what I'm representing to be a true photograph. The object seemed to skip forward at varying speeds and distances very quickly. The craft was silent, was approximately 1,500 feet in elevation, and was larger than a C-5 or C-17. It approached from the southeast and headed west, or rather headed northwest, before disappearing. It reportedly slowed down to approximately 20 knots, then accelerated out of the witness's view almost instantaneously. On March 2nd, at precisely 6:18 p.m., a police officer in Lexington, Nebraska, was sitting in his patrol car waiting for a locksmith to come and unlock a vehicle when he observed an object in the sky to the southeast. He stared at the object for a few seconds and realized it was not moving. He took out his phone and began to take photographs of the object, zooming in as far as he could. In the middle of taking photographs, the object simply vanished. The object was dark in color and looked to be cylindrical in shape. The sighting lasted approximately 2 minutes. And now, some of the latest unknowns from the files of MUFON. In case number 129656, the witness, a retired United States Air Force officer, was outside at his residence in Florida recording the launch of a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket on January 31st of this year when he noticed an object in the general vicinity of the rocket and managed to get several minutes of video. MUFON field investigator Sabrina Robb filed a report in that case, and we had an opportunity to talk to her.
Well, it was a very interesting case, I must admit. Thousands of people probably watched this launch live, but very few actually made a report to MUFON about anything unusual. This witness made a report that no one else did. There was one other witness who made a report that they thought they saw something unusual, and that was nothing like what my witness saw.
So, can you tell us, take us through the sighting? What happened?
Well, first of all, a little background. This was a SpaceX launch. They were launching an Italian communications satellite. It launched at 1811 Florida time, and the sunset was at 1801. So the sun would have been very low in the sky. It was a nominal liftoff. Everything looked good. My witness was interested more in the booster separation and filming those coming back to the ground than he was in the anything else.
And at some point in the video, he notices this object.
Yeah, he is talking, in the video of what he's seeing, and then he nonchalantly mentions, well, that's something unusual near the craft, and it doesn't look like an airplane. What is that? And he mentions it for a few seconds, and then doesn't really mention it again. But about a minute 62 seconds into the video, it's quite obvious in the left quadrant, upper left quadrant of the screen, you do see something appear out of virtually nowhere and fly parallel with the craft, which is the launch vehicle. And I guess based on where he was at his home in Melbourne, this craft would have came from the north and then flew on a southerly direction along with the launch vehicle. And I'd say that the object was in the video probably just slightly over a minute. It's at one point it's behind the launch vehicle, and then all of a sudden it moves and it's in front. But at all times it was above the vehicle. It was never even with the vehicle. It was never below the vehicle.
It's I have to admit that it is one of the more interesting videos that I have seen. I think that you mentioned in your report that there was some speculation that it was perhaps a piece of the rocket itself that had come off during the launch and was simply trailing or a bit behind the rocket. But I think that you were able to address that. Is that correct?
Oh, that is correct. Based on the elevation of the object, the part of the video where this object first appears, there has been no separation of anything yet. The vehicle is still at 100% moving through the atmosphere. It hasn't jettisoned its solid rocket boosters or anything yet. The fairing hasn't come off yet. That's about 4 minutes into the launch. So nothing has been discharged from the launch vehicle. And this thing doesn't appear to be tumbling. It doesn't have any exhaust. There's no indication that it's a conventional object at all, actually.
And I can see why you reached the conclusion that you did, that this object was unknown. I'm not certain that I or anyone else would be able to explain precisely what's taking place in the witness's video. And is there anything that you can tell us about the witness without disclosing any confidential information about the witness?
Certainly. I can tell you that he was an E7 in the Air Force when he retired. That's a master sergeant. That's a very high enlisted rank. He was also what we call in the Air Force a first sergeant, meaning he was responsible for several, probably a couple hundred enlisted personnel. He was responsible to watch after them, look after them. When they had problems, needed counseling, they would come to him. So he had a very high position of authority. When he was, his main job in the Air Force for years was as what we call in the Air Force a PJ. And let me back up. I keep saying what we call. I do have 22 years in experience in the Air Force. That's why I say we when I talk about the Air Force. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I noticed that from looking into your background in the CMS database.
But he was highly trained as a PJ, pararescue jumper. These are the folks that jump out of airplanes and rescue downed American flyers who have been shot down or had to bail out for whatever reason. Nobody in the Air Force goes through more stringent and strenuous training than these folks do. It's open to both males and females now, and they are constantly in a state of readiness, ready to respond when needed to rescue American pilots anywhere in the world.
Mm-hmm. So they're trustworthy. And the long and short of it is, you had a very credible witness, and took some really incredible video of this object following this Falcon 9 rocket.
Well, that's true. I mean, I was able to, in my mind, say, okay, I believe him to be very credible, and that's the first thing I always try to figure out when I'm dealing with a new case, is the credibility of the witness, and in this case, his bona fides were well established.
Thank you, Sabrina Robb, for your excellent investigation and report. In MUFON case number 120521, the witness, along with some medical passengers she was transporting, was driving on Interstate 25 in Colorado in the early morning hours of January 24th when she recorded a large bright object that followed her vehicle for several miles.
I don't know what that light is, but I don't know, it just keeps moving, disappearing, comes back out, disappears again. This is the 4th time I've seen this thing, and I don't know what it is. I wish somebody would tell me what it is, unless it's a UFO or I'm tripping. I don't know, but it's tripping me out.
Colorado investigator Becky Cantu looked into that case for us.
Hi, Richard.
Hi.
This was currently my most interesting case. The witness, had described that this shape was like following her along the highway, which is Interstate 25. And she told me that she transports patients in the wee early hours of the day or the night, and between 2 and 6 in the morning. And she had noticed that all of a sudden, as she was going either to the north or the south on I-25, that there was this object going alongside her car and really not that even far away. And it was doing it morning after morning after morning. And even when I closed the case, it was still following her. So she took a video. She took some still pictures.
Yeah, it appears in the video to be rather large.
Right, because it was fairly close to her. And I mean, it didn't matter if it was 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning. All of a sudden it would show up. And it was like, as fast as she could go, the object would stay up with her. And I closed the case and it was still following her.
So this case had a high degree of strangeness aspect to it.
Correct. And the day she reported, I think, was January the 25th, but it also occurred January the 24th. And when I closed it 2 weeks ago, which would be early March, it was still following her.
Becky also reported that the witness had reported having several possible abduction experiences over the course of her life and may have even taken an unwilling part in an alien hybridization program. Thank you, Becky Cantu, for your excellent investigation and report. Change is a good thing. It keeps us aware of our surroundings and forces us to adapt. It keeps our brains from turning to putty. From the edge of the universe to the tiny telescope in your own backyard, the search for life beyond the Earth goes on. But is it possible that the answers are already there, like Robert Bigelow says, right under our noses? The greatest amount of resistance to this subject comes from a cadre of religious zealots in the Pentagon that view the subject of extraterrestrials as demonic. They're not aliens at all, you see, but demons sent here by Satan to deceive us for some reason. If we study them, we are allowing Satan into our physical world. Clearly, that's hogwash. Even in the 21st century, we, like the dregs of Bruno's age, are mired in our own irrational dogma. Fear. Fear of the other. That is what keeps us, that is, humankind, from learning the truth. Like Australopithecines beating each other's brains out with the thigh bones of herd animals on the plains of the ancient Transvaal region of South Africa 5 million years ago in Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey, we are prisoners of our reptilian brain. Still, there are those who know the truth, but keep it from us for other reasons, more sobering, perhaps prudent reasons, because the truth of the phenomenon may prove to be too disturbing for people to handle. For example, what if it turns out that these objects in our skies, the ones that pay particularly close attention to our nuclear weapons, are not only being controlled by little gray humanoid aliens from Zeta Reticuli, synthetic beings or creatures that resemble reptiles or insects? We could swallow that. But what about humans from the future? Humans from an alternate timeline in a distant future who've come here to stop something that happened to them a long time ago in their past, in our now. What if it turns out that we're food? Or what if it turns out that they're interested in harvesting our souls? What if it turns out that we are just a genetic experiment gone awry? Can you handle that? My question is, why would disinterested aliens from planets light years away care at all about our nuclear weapons unless they had some vested interest in our planet? I don't pretend to know what that vested interest could possibly be. But when it comes to this phenomenon, I know one thing, and that is that things are not always as they seem. We may well be living in something akin to the Matrix. Our entire existence may be nothing more than a controlled hallucination. Thank you for listening. And for those of you on YouTube, thank you for watching. And please remember to like and subscribe below. We'll see you next time, right here on the official MUFON Podcast.